Hey, Pioneers! Welcome to episode number 456. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to have a water source on your homestead for both yourself and especially if you have livestock in a long-term power outage. I'll get that one out there. This is a topic and something that we have been thinking about on our homestead for quite a while. And this is where I always like to use the lens of where it's good, better, and best. And so what I mean by that is we have our own private well. We live quite rurally, and in fact, it's the only water option that we have. There is no public water option for us to tie into, for which I'm actually quite grateful because I don't want to be on a water system that uses chlorine or some of the other chemicals that a lot of public water systems use in order to treat their water. So I'm actually quite grateful we're on our own private well. However, that means when the power goes out or the electricity goes out, our well is not working because it does require electricity for the pump to be able to run. Now, it's been about 5 years ago that we got a generator that is large enough to actually power our pump. Pumps, believe it or not, actually use a large amount of electricity, especially to get started going. And so you have to have a pretty good sized pump with some larger running watts in order to operate a private well. We got that about 5 years ago. So, of course, that means that you have to have some type of fuel for your generator in order to operate it. But when the power goes out, we do have running water via our generator. However, I'm always looking with an eye towards the next best setup or how to become even more independent than where we currently are. And so, of course, when you're looking at your generator for our water, that means that the generator has to be working and running, but it also means that I have to have fuel for it. So in a long-term situation where there could be power down extensively in an area and or where roadways could be cut off, and we've had that happen here due to mudslides. The longest period of time that we have been without power and had the main road, thankfully there were some back roads that were open we could get through, but our main highway was shut down for almost a full 2 weeks. It was like 13 days and some odd hours. So I'm always thinking, okay, what if we run out of fuel or are not able to replenish our fuel? Well, for us, we have got our wood stove. So I've got the capability for heat, and we always keep a good supply of wood on hand, ideally 2 years of dried, cured firewood. So that part I feel pretty secure in, and we'd be able to replenish during that time. And we've got our food supply. We can replenish a lot of our food long term. So that feels pretty good. But when it comes to water, like, ooh, on our property, we don't have a year round running water supply. So I have been thinking about and looking into getting a hand pump that would be large enough volume and that we could put on our existing well. I don't want to have to choose between one or the other. So I was really excited for today's interview because I have a lot of questions regarding which type to get, how much it's actually going to provide us with water, especially when looking at larger volume for livestock. So I'm super excited for today's podcast. So you may not be on a private well, but you might at some point move out to the country or to acreage or to somewhere, or maybe you're thinking about putting in a well if you have that option. And I think it's just a really good conversation for folks to have and to know what some of those options that are available out there to help make a good decision for you and your homestead. So I am excited for today's guest, which is a company called Flojak. So Flojak is a trusted provider of manual well pump systems designed to ensure reliable access to water in any situation, whether during a power outage, natural disaster, or for off-grid living. With products that are both easy to install and use, Flowjack empowers individuals and families to maintain water independence and preparedness. Their innovative hand pumps are engineered for durability, versatility, and exceptional performance, making them an essential tool for your homestead or emergency preparedness plan. So, without further ado, here is today's episode. All right. Well, Jonathan and Cody, welcome to the Pioneering Today podcast. I am actually really, really excited about this episode because this is something we've been wanting to implement for quite a while. And honestly, I just haven't known the exact steps to take forward to make sure I'm doing it the right way. And so it just kind of keeps at the bottom of the list. So super excited to talk with you guys today.
Well, thank you, Melissa. We know that you have a busy schedule just with all of your projects and everything that you do. So thank you for taking the time to have us on. It's much appreciated.
Yeah. Well, we're talking obviously about pumps and water. And I think you don't even have to be a homesteader to know, obviously, how important water is at your home, but especially for homesteaders who are wanting to look at ways to be more self-sufficient, but also have livestock needs. And so for us, when I'm thinking about if my pump isn't working, or a regular water pump, we don't even have the option of being on any type of city water or any type of system like that. It's all individual pumps. But if like our pump were to run dry, which in the Pacific Northwest is not really something that most folks have ever had to worry about, including us, our well is pretty high and we've got a really good water table. But if the power's out for an extended period of time, it's not just drinking water for us, which is actually a little bit easier to have a backup supply, honestly. But when you have livestock and you're talking, 30 head of cattle, they go through a lot of water, and that's not, chickens and whatnot. And so for us, it's always like, okay, how do we make sure that we've got sufficient water supply if we couldn't run our pump through a generator or electricity? Then what are our options? So I think this is a really important conversation to have. So first off, will you explain a little bit about your guys' pump and how it actually works?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think tying into your point, Cody here has livestock. He's got a house with a ginormous family in it. And so, if he doesn't have power, he's got a lot to take care of. Cody, I know that you can talk to some of your experiences with not having power and using a Flojak at your well for your needs. So
we bought our homestead about 3 years ago, and it was just a rundown thing. We had to get a well pump put in, and we're from the St. Louis area in Missouri, so we've never really gone without power before moving down here to the middle of nowhere, and there's no house behind us for miles. We're the last ones on the line, and it seems like power went out every time it thunderstormed, and we would have to travel down to a creek. I'd drive my truck down whenever the power would go out and fill up 5-gallon buckets, drive back, carry them inside to flush toilets and filter the water. And then one winter, there was nothing in the creek, and I had to hike into the woods to a spring, carry out buckets of water for 1.5 miles to get back to my truck and then back up to the house. Now we have this Flojak, and I can literally pump just water right into my house, just hook it up to my system and pump the water into my house. And it's a game changer, because we went through the same thing with the cows and our chickens, and how are we going to get this water? And the longest we went was 5 days. And you can go without electricity, but you cannot go without water.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people, especially if it's in winter, equate power outages, so no running water. But if there's snow, they're like, well, you can just melt snow for water. And I'm like, have you ever actually seen how much snow it takes to equal any amount of volume? Because I can have my 8-gallon stock pot stuffed with snow, and when it melts, you're lucky if it's an inch. Right. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I think until you actually experience it firsthand, you don't kind of realize how much harder it can be. So the Flojak is a pump for home wells. I'm correct in that? So, and it works, you can hook it up so that it's ready to go when the electricity goes out. So it's more of a backup pump, but it can be done on the same system and kind of in tandem.
They're designed to exist in the same casing as your electric pump. So most wells, given they're 4 inches or above, you have the space because it's just its own separate line. You've got your electric pump running down, and then you've got your hand pump running down. So both of them can exist in the same well. And so, yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about what are some of the scenarios with the Flojak. Obviously we've kind of talked about power outages, but I think another thing to talk about is not just a big storm comes through and knocks out your power. To your point, Cody, you have thunderstorms there.
here it's just windstorms. Like a windstorm like goes through, somebody sneezes and it would seem like a tree branch would come down and take out the power. Even in summertime, like it really isn't just winter here. It's just kind of all throughout the seasons. But there's also lots of different natural disasters that can come through. And those typically what we're talking about, I'm sure with you with the thunderstorms, 5 days here, we've had, power outages. Usually if it's a big windstorm that comes through our county, we're kind of last up priority on the line because it's so rural. 3 to 5 days is, not unheard of, but it can be a lot of some of those bigger natural disasters that I think we are seeing a lot have happened this past year. We've seen Hurricane Helene. We're currently seeing at the time of this recording still the wildfires in California. And so these much bigger ones can have a lot longer potential for power outages. And especially talking about water and the wildfires in California, having a backup water source. I watched one story on the news. I don't know if you guys saw this one. Actually, I don't think it was on the news. I take that back. I think it was on Instagram. And it was sharing where he stayed behind, which I'm not advocating if you are told to evacuate, right?
Get out of Dodge if you can.
Yeah. So let's just be clear there. However, this was in this instance, he ended up staying behind and still had running water. And he was actually able to save it was kind of like this little complex of homes. And he was actually able to save it by staying behind it and fighting it with the water. So wow. I found that really interesting because I know in particularly this instance with the California fires, a lot of the reservoirs were dry. And so even the firefighters weren't able to. And I know when we have we've not had a wildfire actually threaten our home, but we've had them up in the mountains surrounding us and that type of thing. And so that is something that, that we think about. My husband is a volunteer firefighter. And so it's, having that water source to wet down your roof, and to kind of keep that green area around your home. Obviously you need to have running water. So do you want to kind of talk to some scenarios that you guys have seen where people have been using the Flojaks and kind of how those come into play?
Well, I mean, I think one big area that you hit was Hurricane Helene too. I mean, you would not believe how many people from that zone we had calling us when that happened. I mean, that was probably the most busy month in this company's history. And we would, we'd offer humongous discounts for those people as well and try and give some away to people who were out there and struggling with that because they had zero water. I mean, that was a lifeline for them, quite literally, going through that time.
And what was hard for some of them was that the roads were gone and they couldn't even receive deliveries. So like the UPS wasn't even running in that area. FedEx wasn't running in that area. There were people calling and ordering pumps from counties away to kind of backpack them in there. So that, and everyone thought like, hey, well, I'll just use my generator if I ever come across a problem like this. But the fuel trucks weren't running because there were no roads anymore. And I'm assuming that there could potentially be areas like that devastated by fires or earthquake, anything along these lines of these natural disasters. So.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, like fuel storage is great. And like we have a generator to run our pump in our home and the necessities there, but you can only store so much fuel for so long. So I don't like my water source being tied to something that I can't ensure long term. That type of thing for the peace of mind. So let's talk about we talked a little bit about livestock, but on average for a typical homesteader, how much water per day do you need for your family and livestock for drinking, food preparation, and hygiene? So kind of like, not just like, this is going to keep us, from total dehydration, but like kind of normal functionality of life.
Sure. I mean, if you've got a family of 4 and you have livestock, I mean, you're going to need 100 gallons a day. I mean, a cow can drink 30 plus gallons a day. Hygiene and cooking, you could be using 20 to 30 gallons a day. So as far as being able to get that amount of water for one of our pumps, we have 2 options really. One is called our Flojak Ready. It's easily deployed emergency pump. You can do about a gallon and a half a minute. And then we have one called the Flojak Rigid, which is a stainless steel pump that's giving you 3 to 4 gallons a minute. So I'll spare myself from embarrassing myself on the math portion, but I'd say give it maybe, an hour or so, and you could probably get the water that you would need just for a full day of taking care of your family and your animals, just with the Flojak Rigid.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit earlier about wells, and we were talking about the casings, and you said if it was a 4-inch casing, that you'd probably be good to go. So is there any other considerations that you need to know about your well to know if it's suitable for a Flojak hand pump?
Every well is so unique and different. I mean, some people have apparatuses going on in their wells that, I mean, we've never even seen before. You really, it's all about having the clearance, having the space to just insert that one line all the way down. As long as you have the space for that, you'd be good to go.
Okay.
The easiest way that I tell people is 2 inches and 1/16. So that's the clearance that you would need. So the easiest way is to pop your cap off, get like a Schedule 40 piece of 1.25 PVC, and then just a simple coupling. Put that coupling on there and try to slide it down. If it goes unobstructed, you can slide it past your pitless adapter and just slide it right in there next to your drop pipe. Then our Flojak rigid will fit. But if it's obstructed and you're forcing it, then most likely our pump's not going to fit. But that's why we have the Flojak ready, because that way that will fit. That only requires about 1 inch of clearance. So you can slide that in there and still be able to get water in an emergency.
Okay. What is the maximum depth that the Flojaks can pull from?
We can reach 250 feet of static water level, which people hear static water level, they might have no idea what that means. That is essentially your water level. How many feet down until you hit your water? That's such a foreign term to people, though, but it's one that we use all the time. But 250 feet is what we can go with our Flojak rig.
Okay, that's pretty far.
Sizable.
Yeah. Okay, so right now I'm 22 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So what do I need to know about having a Flojak in the wintertime? I'm assuming because it's a hand pump that it's not going to hold water and worried about freezing, but it could be absolutely wrong. So talk to me a little bit about that, how it works in the freezing temps.
We install weep holes on every single one of our pumps about 7 feet down. So typically you won't have your frost line deeper
that far,
7 feet deep, right?
Yeah.
But if you did, you could just drill another 1.6 or 1/16 of an inch weep hole. Just whenever you're done pumping, it's just going to drain back down to where it doesn't freeze. So we already take care of that before we ship anything out. So they will all be freeze proof when you receive them.
Okay, great. That's good to know that it's one less thing I have to worry about trying to winterize or trying to run like a heat lamp on when I don't have electricity. So that's okay. So for the Flojaks, do they have to have any type of clearance, right, for the hand pump action from, your good Lord, the casing, the top of your pump? Wow, I sound super intelligent right now.
So for the Flojak rigid, it will go up. You can adjust it to whatever's going to be comfortable for you. So it's going to sit about 20 inches above your casing, like when it's in its fully depressed position. But you can, whenever you're actually pumping it, you'll bring it up to about, I'd say, on just under 4 feet. So and you can adjust it to what's going to be comfortable, and that's the only clearance that you would need.
And when most people think hand pumps, I think they think the big lever coming out and the spout looking down like that. And so, I mean, for people that aren't watching us with our hand movements, that are listening to us, think of a pogo stick. That is essentially what our pumps look like and how they function. You're pressing them up and down like a pogo stick would go. And so as far as clearance and worrying about a long handle coming out, that's not a concern. It's just the up and down and making sure that those handles aren't going to be knocking into anything.
Okay. So, and this is where I always get hung up because I'm like, oh man, I'm messing with my water. Like, well, what if I mess up my existing like electrical, system that I've got going now with my plumbing, trying to install these? So is it something that you can install on your own, or like maybe you need to have a little bit of plumbing knowledge, or do you need to get a professional, or what do you see most of your customers doing? Kind of walk me through that part.
These are really, really easy to do by yourself. However, I will say that you're going to want to have somebody around to help you with the weight, because they can get, depending on how deep you go, they can get heavy, but you don't need any special tools out of the box. I've done one. I can put one together, and I can't do much. So trust me, if I can do it, most people can do it, but it's recommended to have somebody by your side just to help you manage the weight. And I mean, these are, lot of pipes and it's a big pump that you're dealing with. I wouldn't want to do it by myself. So having one person, a friend, a parent, a son, you name it, that would be okay. And Cody, if you want to add anything onto that, feel free.
So they are do-it-yourself projects. Like each one was designed to be as easy to install as possible. But that being said, there are a lot of customers that will opt to just hire someone to do it for them. And I don't want to offend any like well guys or plumbers or anything, but it's unnecessary to have to hire someone because it's so incredibly easy. We did a 200-foot one in my house and got it installed in 45 minutes. So I always try to caution people like, hey, you don't need to hire someone that's going to charge you a couple $1,000 to put this in whenever you or some friends from church can get this put in an hour.
Okay. So when I was younger, I should say, my dad's, we call it the homestead, but it's where he grew up and it still doesn't have electricity. It's like an outhouse. And they had one of the old hand pumps with the long lever, like legit in the kitchen. And when I was little, nobody was actually living there. So it's not like it was getting used every day. But when he wanted to get water, we'd go over there and sometimes have like family gatherings or picnics or something like that. We would use the water from the pump, but it would lose its prime. And so he would like have to reprime it. So you'd have to have like some water to pour down it to get it going again. So that's really my only experience with like a true hand pump. Is that something that, because this is in the same casing with your regular electrical pump and water would be flowing, but it wouldn't be flowing through the hand pump. Like, do you ever have to prime it is what I'm getting at? Or do they lose their prime? Okay.
No, I'm grateful that we don't have to do that.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with having to prime it, but these pumps don't have to be primed. So like they literally self-priming, like you're just opening the foot valve at the bottom every time you pump and you're pumping water.
Okay, sweet. So you don't have to keep that emergency reserve of water when you're already out of water in order to get it going. Okay, that's a good thing. Good thing to know. So how hard is it to use as far as like, is there like a certain, I don't know if pounds of pressure is the right word, but you know what I mean? Like when you're pumping it, like how much strength, like how wore out are you going to get, say, trying to say I need to fill a 5-gallon bucket, for example, not the livestock tank.
Sure.
Like what type of exertion, muscle strength?
I will say that depends on how deep you're pumping from, because I mean, the deeper you go into a water column, just the more weight you're having to pull up because of how heavy that water is. We invented something. We have a guy that works with us who invented something called airlift for our Flojak rigid. It is an air tank that's tied to our pump, and you can fill that air tank up with a bicycle pump. And whenever you turn that on, it's like a counterweight to all the weight that you'll experience from 200 feet of pumping. And so instead of having to pull up all this massive amount of water weight, this pump will actually come up on its own. You'll just sit there and push down, and it'll come back up on its own. And Cody, you can allude more to it because he has one on a 200-foot well and has more experience with it. So
it's exactly what Jonathan said. Just a counterweight, a counterbalance. So it's reversing the way that the pressure needs to be applied. So you're no longer lifting the weight of the water column and the weight of the pipe. Yeah, it's going to assist in that, and you're going to push down. So our pump's going to come with a small air tank that a lot of people think, oh, is that a compressor tank? But it's just a reservoir, and that has a Schrader valve, so you can pump it up with a bicycle pump. And then once you open that valve, it will charge the air cylinders there at the handle. So that'll assist in the lifting. And then you can dial it into your pressure of whatever. So for different depths or different strengths or whatever, it's much easier. We found at our house around 43 PSI, like is what my wife could not lift this without the air assist. And once we open the valve up, she's able to do it too. But you still have to put some strength into it to push it down now, instead of lifting up. But and for 100-foot, that seems to be prime. I mean, it's almost effortless at that point. It's incredibly easy. So and you need less air pressure in the tank, and but it was designed for. The engineer said, "I want a 5-foot tall elderly woman to be able to do this effortlessly," and he essentially achieved that. But we found the deeper that you go, the more effort is required. So that's kind of why we capped it at 250, because you still need to really put your back into it at that point.
Okay, so if you have a shallow well, or your water, static water is shallow, you're probably not going to have, it's going to be pretty effortless then.
For sure.
Yep.
Okay. So talk to me, if I want to hook a hose up to this bad boy to fill my stock tank, of course, the further away it is or the longer my hose, right? I'm going to have, one, is that possible? And two, have you tested it to be like, you can go 25 feet, you're not going to get 100 feet, or do you have any type of info on that, or guesstimations, or can you?
Yeah, you can go. So before we came out with this, we had a predecessor, which was the Flojak Plus model, and we found that you had 200 feet of lift, and your distance would be a part of that lift as well.
Okay.
But we found with this that didn't really apply, because mine is 200 feet. And I have a static of 170, and I pumped my bladder tank all the way up to pressure, and I pumped all the way to our house, which is about 200 feet away, through all of our pressure lines. And also I ran a hose out to our field to fill up our trough, and that was probably about 250 feet away. And so yeah, it totally works. And you can even pump that uphill. Like if we had talked about running a tank up on the side of the ridge that we live on, and see that way we can get more water pressure and kind of filling that up. But it does work. I can just move that hose wherever I want and keep pumping water.
Okay, that is music to my ears. I'm very happy to hear that. But like, I think in my brain, I was envisioning like, go out to my pump house, pump the water, bring it back to the house. But you actually have it hooked up so it can take over and just feed into the lines of the house and like fill your existing system off of it. Like, okay.
So my well house is about 10 feet from my well, and I just run a hose directly from that to the bladder tank, and I just started pumping. And I drained our bladder tank, turned off our electric so we could prove that it could be done. Then a lot of people were skeptical too, and because it's so deep, we didn't know if we'd be able to achieve the pressure. And I was able to pump my bladder tank up to 47 psi, so that filled up all the pressure lines in our house, and pumped our bladder tank up. So it took a long time though, and I was about done pumping after that.
Okay, but good to know, right? That there was a lot of effort. It's going to take some work to get there. So there's options for obviously other manual types of pumps out on the market. What kind of sets Flojak apart from some of the other manual pumps that folks might be looking at?
So I think one of the biggest factors is the fact that we outperform our competitors. We're getting more volume with less effort, which if you look at any other hand pump on the market, whenever you want to get to a deeper static water level, they're having to reduce the amount of volume that you get for each pump. So that's something that Airlift has been a huge player in, is that we're not having to reduce the amount of water that you get, just to be able to make it easier. So if you'd like to allude to some of that too.
Yeah. So we have a fixed stroke. So there's a fixed 15-inch stroke on there. So no matter how deep you're going, you're getting the exact same volume. So if you're going 250 feet, you're going to get the same as if you had a 50-foot pump. And we're the only pump on the market that does that.
Okay.
And we're freeze proof, made in the USA as well. And yeah.
All right. The made in USA makes me very happy. So when using your guys' pump, what do you suggest for people who have water softening or filtration systems, like, for example, for metals such as like arsenic, iron, or other heavy minerals, to keep their water potable and safe for consumption? Like, can you run it through those filters, or do you run into that very often?
So we do. I have spoken to a lot of people that have that, and I personally am in the middle of plumbing in a home filtration system. But we always just pump water, and any water, even when we run it through our electric submersible pump, anything that comes through there, we filter in a gravity-fed filter on our counter. So we don't drink anything from our well because we have so much different mineral contents in there. But I would say in an emergency situation, if you may be able to achieve the pressure to go through some of these home systems. But every home filtration system is different, and we haven't done the testing to see what type of water pressure you'll be able to filter through there. But I'm eager to test it on my own here in a couple weeks when I get that project finished.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so where's the best place for people to go? And if they're like, man, I'm not kind of sure which of these models to go with, or this is my system, like, can they email in to you guys and get like some type of assistance when they're kind of going through that process? Like, do you offer that through the website?
Absolutely. You can either visit our website at flojak.com, which is spelled FLOJAK.com. You can call us. One of us will pick up the phone when you call, and that's at 855-435-6525. Or you can email us at info@flojak.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming on and talking about this. I think it's really often an overlooked part of homesteading. Like, we talk a lot about, fermenting and canning and raising a garden and getting livestock, but this isn't necessarily one of the sexy subjects that really gets brought up a lot, but it's so important to the success of all of those things to make sure that you've got that backup water supply. So thank you.
Of course. Hey, thank you so much for
Thank
having us. I mean, really, we appreciate it. You've been very kind to us.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And as always, if you want to look at the show notes or check out some of the links and resources that we've mentioned, you can always find those at melissaknorris.com/456, just the number 456. It's episode number 456. And I will look forward to being back here with you next week. Until then, blessings in mason jars, my friends.